He drove through our neighborhood like the stop signs were decorations. Children played on the sidewalks, people walked their dogs, and cars pulled out of driveways, but this guy treated our residential street like a racetrack. Twice, he nearly hit my car. So I decided to give him a problem he couldn't simply speed away from. If you've ever watched someone get away with reckless behavior while everyone else pays the price, you know how frustrating it can be. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments, would you call this revenge or poetic justice? Because this one is strangely satisfying. There was a dangerous driver in my neighborhood, and when I say dangerous, I don't mean he occasionally rolled through a stop sign or drove 5 miles over the limit. I mean he absolutely flew down our street. It was the kind of driving that made you stop whatever you were doing and look up. You'd hear the engine before you saw the car, then whoosh, there he'd be, tearing down a residential street where children were constantly playing, and that was the part that bothered me most. Our neighborhood wasn't some empty stretch of road where a driver could reasonably expect to be alone. Kids played on the sidewalks. They ran between houses. Parents walked with strollers. People walked their dogs. It was a neighborhood. People were supposed to feel safe there. Instead, every time I saw that car approaching, I felt my attention snap toward the street. Where is he going? How fast is he driving? Is anyone crossing? Is a kid about to run out? And then there were the stop signs. Twice that year, this guy had blown straight through one and nearly hit my car. Not a slow roll. Not a questionable judgment call. He blew through it. The first time, I remember my stomach dropping as I realized he wasn't stopping. The second time, I was already anticipating it, and that's when the frustration really started to sink in. Because what are you supposed to do? You can honk, you can yell, you can report it, you can ask the neighborhood to do something, and I did try. I looked into getting a speed survey done. I tried to find out about getting a speed bump installed, but there was a catch. The neighborhood needed 75% approval, and we had to fund it ourselves. That's a pretty difficult threshold when you're talking about getting an entire neighborhood to agree on something. I also contacted the police. They promised increased patrols. That sounded reassuring. For a moment, I thought maybe something would actually change. Then the increased patrols turned out to be a single cruiser at around 6 in the morning, not exactly prime time for a maniac driver racing past children. So the problem remained. The driver kept speeding. The stop signs remained stop signs. The children remained outside, and I remained worried that one day I'd hear a crash instead of an engine. Then, in April, something happened that gave me a completely different perspective on this guy. I was walking my dog. It was an ordinary walk, something I'd done countless times. As we approached the man's house, I saw the same car. It came flying down the street, straight through the stop sign. Then it turned into his driveway and disappeared into his garage. I stood there for a moment. My dog was sniffing around, completely unconcerned. And then I looked at the man's lawn. It was beautiful, absolutely immaculate. The grass was green, thick, perfectly maintained. It looked like the kind of lawn that someone spent a ridiculous amount of time caring for. And that's when a thought occurred to me. I already walked past this house twice a day, every day. I didn't need to change my routine. I didn't need to confront him. I didn't need to argue with him. I didn't need to chase him down the street. I just needed to notice something. Mint, specifically, peppermint. If you've ever tried growing mint, you probably already know where this is going. Mint isn't exactly famous for respecting boundaries. It's a prolific grower. An aggressive spreader. Once it gets established, it can be incredibly difficult to remove completely. Even tiny pieces of root can produce new plants. And once those roots get into the soil, they can keep multiplying, which made me look at that perfect lawn a little differently. I wasn't going to destroy his house. I wasn't going to damage his car. I wasn't going to threaten him. I wasn't even going to confront him. I was simply going to introduce his perfectly controlled lawn to something that didn't. Believe in boundaries. So I bought a package of peppermint seeds, and I put them on the shelf next to the dog poop bags. That became my little secret. Every morning, I grabbed the leash. Every evening, I grabbed the leash. The dog got excited. I got the poop bags, and sitting right there beside them was the peppermint. As we approached his house, I would casually sprinkle or flick a few tiny seeds into his lawn. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would attract attention, just a few tiny seeds disappearing into the grass. Then I'd keep walking. At first, nothing happened, and honestly, that was probably the funniest part. Days passed, then weeks. The lawn looked exactly the same, perfect, green, neat, untouched, but underneath the surface, something had changed. Eventually, tiny plants began appearing. At first, there were only a few little green intruders poking through the grass. Then more appeared, and more, and more. Summer arrived, and the transformation became impossible to miss. That once perfect lawn was covered in little plants, and I watched from a distance as the homeowner tried to fight back. He mowed, he sprayed, he did what people with immaculate lawns do when something unexpected starts appearing in the grass. But there was one problem: he wasn't pulling the plants up by the roots, and mint doesn't particularly care how many times you cut the top off. If the roots remain, the plant has a way of coming back. So he'd mow the lawn, would look better, then the little plants would return. I'd walk past with my dog. I'd glance over, and there they were. A little more noticeable every time. The perfect lawn was slowly losing its battle, and nobody watching from the outside would have any idea why. That's what made it so satisfying. The man who had made everyone else feel powerless suddenly had a problem he couldn't solve with speed. He couldn't drive away from it. He couldn't ignore a stop sign and make it disappear. He couldn't simply press the gas and leave the consequences behind him. Now the consequences were sitting quietly in his own front yard, and I never had to say a word. Of course, there was something else I kept thinking about. Was this really justice? After all, the lawn wasn't the reason he was dangerous. The dangerous driving was. The lawn didn't put children at risk. His driving did, and that's why I never escalated beyond the lawn. I didn't touch his car. I didn't damage his property. I didn't threaten him. I didn't try to cause an accident. I simply found the one thing he clearly cared about and gave it a little bit of chaos. Meanwhile, the actual problem remained the same. If he wanted to stop speeding, he could. If he wanted to obey the stop signs, he could. If he wanted to slow down around children, he could. None of those things required me to do anything. And maybe that's the strangest thing about revenge. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's just about reminding yourself that the person who made you feel powerless isn't actually untouchable. Every time I walked past that house, I could see the difference. The lawn that once looked almost artificially perfect was now dotted with little green plants. He kept mowing, he kept spraying, and I kept walking. The really funny part: he probably never suspected a thing. To him, it probably looked like one of those annoying lawn problems that appeared out of nowhere. Maybe he blamed the weather. Maybe he blamed birds. Maybe he blamed the previous season. He could probably come up with a dozen explanations, but he probably never looked at the person casually walking a dog past his house twice a day, and that was exactly the point. No confrontation. No shouting match. No dramatic showdown. Just a tiny package of peppermint seeds sitting beside the dog poop bags, and a little patience. Looking back, I still wish the neighborhood had found a real solution. A speed bump would have been better. A legitimate speed survey would have been better. Actual police patrols during the hours when children were outside would have been better, because at the end of the day, a ruined lawn is annoying. A child getting hit by a speeding car is something else entirely. But until the neighborhood could agree on a solution, I had found my own very small form of poetic justice. The man wanted absolute control over his lawn. So I gave him mint. And if you've ever tried to get rid of mint once it decides it belongs somewhere, you already know how this story ends. His car could still go fast, but his lawn? Not so much. And every time I walked past it, I couldn't help smiling, because sometimes the universe doesn't need a dramatic explosion to deliver a lesson. Sometimes it just needs a little green plant and a very long memory. So what do you think? Was this harmless poetic justice? Or did the driver deserve something more direct? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe for more Reddit revenge stories, and share this video with someone who loves watching terrible behavior come back around. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud, sometimes it grows quietly.